Welcome to Deep Space and Dragons, both things that are tax deductible. I'm Richard.
And I am Carl. And I mean, like, yeah, you could probably tax deduct some space, and depending on what you're using your dragon for, I guess that would probably be a business expense you could deduct. And yeah,
Well, I mean,
seems pretty
obviously,
legit.
the dragon's name is Pan and he helps me at a bakery. But before we get into bakeries and dragons, what is new in the Carlverse?
Well, I strained my hip a little while ago, apparently. I didn't actually go to a doctor or anything because it was just my hip was really sore for like, I don't know, probably like
I need
three
you to
weeks
pause
ish.
for a moment because I have to make this joke. Carl, you need to go to the doctor. After all, those hips don't lie. Please continue.
Okay. Uh, I, I last time that my hip got sore because I was sleeping on a couch instead of a real bed. I started sleeping on a real bed and then did some stretches and stuff. So I was like, you know what? My hip's sore again. The stretches seem to work. Um, and Yeah, I've kind of just been doing some hip stretches, some like pigeon pose from yoga. That's kind of really uncomfortable, but it's like it was like the best one for stretching my hip and lower back. And My hip seems to be pretty much fully recovered. So just another reminder to our listeners: self-care is important, and especially as you get older, doing stretches and regular activity is an important part to maintaining your health.
Yeah, so I also have done yoga, so I fully support this message. But also you kind of have that power from the breaker where you're just overloaded on ki and just kind of heal magically.
Well, I mean, it was a very strenuous exercise that put my hip out of whack. So,
I mean, because it's you, our entire audience is picturing you trying to make a parabolic mirror or something, and then it's just collapsing on your hip specifically.
I mean, I don't really feel like going into details. This is not exactly appropriate
So,
for our
moving
podcast.
on
But
to our podcast. Anything else new with you other than damaging yourself and refusing medical attention?
well, the other thing that's new with me is topical. So we should probably hear what's new in the Richard verse first.
Sounds good. So, when you're listening to this episode, this weekend was Canada Day. Yep, that's just happening no matter when you're listening to this episode. This last weekend was Canada Day. Understand me? Alright, so now that I've
Mm,
bent reality to my whim, which our podcast has the power to do clearly
it
and
clearly does.
concisely. So, being the hard partying person that I am, I ventured down to Toronto to paint miniatures.
Ooh.
I know, right? So we were positioned in a high-rise apartment, fireworks were going off in the background, and we painted some miniatures. And as you're aware, with my medically diagnosed super fingers, I managed to paint two miniatures, and they came out pretty good. I put a nice wash on them to make them look like I have talent. One character I accidentally
Just for one second here. I know you said medically diagnosed stupid fingers,
yes.
but it kind of sounded like you said medically diagnosed super fingers. And I was like, oh, that doesn't check out.
I mean super infunctional. Yeah, if you pair it with a negative term right after super bad or super trans fatty acids, then yes.
Anyways, you gave your minifigs a wash. You said.
Yeah, so that's when you use watered down paint to let it pour into the cracks to add shadows in to make it look like you painted the shadows.
Ah.
But I think my favorite moment, so I go to paint the eyes because I was looking at a friend of mine who was painting a miniature and was like, oh yeah, I'm giving this llama realistic fur patterns and I want to put char marks on the gun barrels. I'm like, sure. So I'm like, okay, if you can do that, I can paint this eye. So tried to put the paint in the eye, and there's a giant white spot on the face. So what I ended up doing is I ended up painting it like a bandage across their eyes and matched it on the backside so they have the white bandana and now they're a blind samurai. I'm like, I am happy with me. This makes me feel good about myself. That looks cool. So we did some mini painting. Then we
Mm,
binged a couple episodes of the new season of The Witcher. And then the next
okay.
day, we went to Stormcrow, which is a nerdy bar in downtown Toronto. where we played shot roulette and someone won a shot glass, which was lovely.
Huh.
Man, I just doxed myself. If someone actually listens to this, their ability to try and hunt me down is so impressive. Like, if they just do, like, trigonometry and be like, okay, he spent this long to get here, and he spent this long to get here. That means I just have to knock on the door of every man, woman, and child in the GTA, and I can find him. Easy.
I'm pretty sure all of our audience already knows that I live somewhere in Saskatchewan, which, I mean, there's only like 2 places worth living in Saskatchewan. And that you live somewhere in Toronto.
I will say, though, knocking on every door is actually doable in your place. Like, you could theoretically just knock on every house in that province and eventually find Karl.
Just because the population of Saskatchewan is less than the population of Edmonton doesn't mean you can knock on every house.
I mean, I'm just doing a quick Google search here. Please hold. Places in Saskatchewan. So in Saskatchewan, according to Google, there is roughly 1,000 pizza places in Saskatchewan.
Ooh.
Statistically, since they know you work at a pizzarella, that is a visitable number of pizza places.
That is true.
And you foolishly told them it's Karl with a K. So they could theoretically be like, walk into every place and yell Karl, and you'd be like, yeah, right here. And that's it. They found you, and they get your autograph.
Man, if we're famous enough to hand out autographs, that would be quite amazing.
Right? They'll be like, yeah, I want one of those apple caramel pizzas that you make, and can you sign the box? Be like, this is my best day ever. I got recognized from a podcast. I feel great.
In any event, miniatures were had, board games were played. My friend got a natural 20 on shot roulette for their birthday, giving them a free shot glass. All in all, fantastic Canada Day weekend. Except that the air was so humid I couldn't tell where my sweat ended and the air began. That was slightly problematic. That does sound slightly problematic.
So that's what's new in the Richardverse, is it's so fun to listen to these episodes. What did you do? I was indoors writing for 3 days. Indoors. Went out this weekend. And people are like, what? Gasp!
People actually go out nowadays?
But yes, so on to our feature topic. Indiana Jones and Indiana Jones-esque properties, which I believe you are ready to go right in that topic.
Because the other thing that was new with me is that I watched Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny over the Canada Day weekend.
That's a choice. So, the last Indiana Jones movie I watched has the infamous fridges are nuclear warhead proof, which has been added into every work of fiction I've ever wrote. I specifically, when describing a post-apocalyptic wasteland in my cyberpunk novel, describe a fridge, and when you open it, there's a perfectly preserved skeleton.
So Film Theory actually did an episode on this where there's a small detail that the fridge is lead lined. It's actually like written on, like a little plaque on the fridge in the movie.
It still would get really hot from the nuclear explosion, which generates heat. I'm told.
The bomb that he theoretically survived, based on the tower and the design of the bomb, is, I forget what the Film Theory said, but it was like Smokey was the name of the bomb. And then using data from other doomsday towns or doom towns or whatever they call them, they figured that he's actually far enough away from the epicenter of the explosion where it would do serious damage to the town. But it's not too hot, it's not too windy, and the fridge is lead lined so he wouldn't immediately die of radiation poisoning. Film Theory suggested that he would actually die because fridges in that era didn't have latches that let you open them from the inside, so he'd be sealed in and would suffocate.
So, to follow up on that one, first I'm going to ask, do you, in your heart of hearts, genuinely believe they researched whether this fridge thing would work when they wrote that movie?
Well, again, according to Film Theory, George Lucas found some scientific papers that said that his odds of surviving were 50-50. But It's not scientifically accurate because how like it's an 800-pound fridge if it has 1/10 an inch lining of lead. So there's not enough force to have actually sent the fridge past the blast wave at a higher speed. It's not very actually accurate to physics, but theoretically, uh, he could have survived being nuked by going into the fridge. He just probably wouldn't have been able to get out and died from
So after
suffocation.
trapping you in the fridge debate, so before we go into the new Indiana Jones movie, did you ever watch Relic Hunter when it was on the air?
Relic Hunter?
So
I,
back in
no,
my
I don't think I
youth,
have.
and when Sci-Fi Channel was a thing I would put on the air when I was home from a sick day, there's a few shows
Mm,
that worked their way onto Sci-Fi Channel, and one was called Relic Hunter. It was a
mm,
Canadian adventure series that had a surprising amount of research with random science fiction thrown in, where they're
mm.
looking for random relics. And I remember one episode where there's this supposedly magic orb that was found in the Minotaur's labyrinth that would lead you out.
Mm.
And the trick ended up being that the floor had just such a subtle slant to it that the ball would follow the floor out at the incline, and the magic behind the orb was ball's roll.
Yeah, okay.
And it followed an archaeologist professor and their British assistant searching for relics, and it was basically Indiana Jones of the week, and I loved it.
Ooh. Uh, well, so one of the things that I find interesting about the Indiana Jones franchise as a whole, and they didn't really do much of this in the most recent one, but most of them have a scene where, like in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones, being the sociopath that he is, uh,
Accurate. He's just literally a grave robber, by definition.
not
I've been
I
hurting you
think he's
so
just straight.
much.
He's just straight up a sociopath. Uh, like his the love of his life, Marion, at some point in the past, and they never go over this in any of the movies. He ditched her in Nepal, just like left her there, no money, nothing. And so then she is resourceful and starts running a bar, and then he comes back to find her when she has something that's of value to him. But it's like the the Raiders of the Lost Ark. He at some point before that he just ditched the love of his life in Nepal, and then in the Temple of Doom. I get that it's a life or death struggle, but in the opening sequence, he has a friend that's pretending to be a waiter, and then when he's in trouble, the friend comes up with a gun under the tray, and then the champagne starts popping off, and he gets shot while the champagne is popping off, and he dies.
Makes
And he
sense.
has a line, that's a specific line where he says, "Oh, Indy, we've been on so many adventures together, but this is my last one." And then he dies. And then absolutely no emotional response on the part of Indiana Jones for the entire movie, for anything ever. That guy's not even mentioned in any other movie. The guy just supposedly went on all of these adventures with Indiana Jones off screen, and yeah, he's cool with that. He died, but
Well, maybe the guy was full of crap, and Indiana Jones had never met this man in his life.
but maybe this is a hallmark of George Lucas in general because he named Star Wars Episode 4. He named it Episode 4 so that it would seem like there was more to the story than there actually was. Not that he had no ideas what else he was going to do in the prequels, but George Lucas seems to like to add details that are unimportant to the story that's currently being told, but make it seem like the universe and the stories that are within it are much bigger than what you're being presented.
Which, I mean, is actually a fair tactic, to be fair. Especially, to give George Lucas some credit, which I guess is a thing I'm doing. The idea is that you make something, but you want to make it feel like the world's bigger than the one thing you did, is really good
Mm,
for something for other creatives. So, let's take Dungeons and Dragons for an example. If I write
mm-hmm.
like a Dungeons and Dragons adventure and just mention some random deities and monsters and things, that means you, Karl, making your spin-off novel, have things to latch onto and build it out. So if you're
Right.
intending to let your idea go out into the world, putting little hooks like that,
Mm.
like, oh, I've been in many adventures, is fantastic if you're an Indiana Jones novel writer, or if you're trying to make the Indiana Jones board game. And the thing is,
Right.
that worked because between Star Wars 4 and 5, there was RPGs, storybooks, like they just made content to fill in the jar. And you can't do that with John Wick 1 because it was a tight, coherent story. John Wick 2, it's easy because suddenly there's assassins in the desert.
Right.
So I'm not going to shade the concept, but I will agree that Indiana Jones is a sociopath. Which is kind
100%,
of
just straight up a sociopath.
somewhat related. So if we consider National Treasure and the Da Vinci Code to be in the same genre, I was watching Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and he has a full rant about how much he hates the Da Vinci Code because the first answer to the riddle was apple, the most obvious answer to a riddle imaginable, because it was like the thing that fell on Newton's head. It's like, and no one else but Robert Landon could realize that the clue was apple. It's like, no, that's the first, you say Newton, you think apple. There's no like deep dive required. Just apple, APPLE was the code. So like, sometimes these adventure series where like, I solved the magic riddle raises the obvious question of, how is no one on this entire planet solved and figured out this mystery and made it into this location?
Well, I mean, for Benjamin Gates, a la National Treasure, the pieces that he was looking for his map were hidden in like national treasures, namely the desks of previous presidents and stuff. So it's not exactly easy to get into.
You mean to tell me at no point at the Smithsonian did anybody at any point scan that paper and notice there was a weird residue on the back? No one? No one has studied the Declaration of Independence. And he's like, yeah, you have to put lime juice and heat on. I'm like, you are aware that they litmus test that paper, right? To date it. And like, no one figured this? No one. Okay. Although, to be fair, some things do actually stay that secret for a long time, like the secret room in Legend of Zelda. Although, to be fair, you had to specifically glitch into it to find the contest winner room. So, like, it's a weird pet peeve I have in movies of when they claim no one could figure something out and it's super obvious. Like in the Ready Player One movie, you just had to drive backwards on the track. I'm like, I do that. I'm not that smart. But at Diddy Kong Racing told me you have to go backwards to get a gold key. So if there's $1 billion prize and you need to try everything on this course, none of them went. I go backwards on every stage in every game ever for treasure, because one time I missed a Final Fantasy X weapon because I didn't do that, and never again.
But Indiana Jones, definitely a sociopath. But okay, so a quick spoiler-free review of the Dial of Destiny is it's a movie about loss, grief, and getting older.
Can we pause for a moment? I really wish we had like preview reels where it's like, because you gave this beautiful preamble of my spoiler-free review. It is a movie. I'm like, scene, perfect.
See, no, so the themes of the movie are loss, grief, and getting older, which lead to it being a decent overall movie, but not a very good Indiana Jones movie, because the character inconsistencies of Indiana Jones kind of, it's just like he doesn't really match those themes because he's just a sociopathic grave robber. Like that's really all there is to it. He's just, but then his son died off screen in the Korean War. Marion is divorcing him, and it's just
for obvious reasons.
Because he's a sociopath.
He's very divorceable from. I'm just saying, you watch the Indiana Jones franchise, you're like, yeah, that man I would marry then divorce. That is correct.
But so it was a pretty good movie, but it also suffered from not being directed by Steven Spielberg, and the new director didn't even bother trying to copy Spielberg's style, and then having questionable creative leadership led to it, combined with the fact that it's about grief, loss, and getting older, led to it not really feeling like an Indiana Jones movie. And it probably would have been better if it wasn't an Indiana Jones movie and was instead about an aging veteran who got involved in a Nazi plot to
So Rambo, the literal plot of Rambo. So to follow up with that, but for the record, I want to just put this into like all media I do. I am anti-Nazi. Nazis are bad.
Mm,
So, so I think one of the best Indiana Jones movies is The Mummy.
the Mummy
Yeah,
with Brendan Fraser.
yeah. It's like, what if Indiana Jones was also really funny?
Fair enough. I mean, not that Indiana Jones doesn't have some funny moments. The iconic scene where he shoots the guy he brings a gun to the knife fight, and then actually they follow it up in the sequel, in the Temple of Doom, where he loses his gun early on in the movie, and then two guys with swords come at him, and then he goes to pull out his gun and forgot that he lost it earlier on in the movie.
I mean, that is a great use of Chekhov's gun. 10 out of 10. Do recommend. So it's like,
then he somehow just beats up those guys because he's Indiana Jones. So
yeah. Then National Treasure. It's like right now I'm like National Treasure. I don't know if I like it better or worse than an Indiana Jones movie because I think as a general rule, do not like legitimizing the founders of the United States of America because they were objectively bad people. And like, yeah, they held this treasure. I'm like, this treasure, are we going to mention that they pillaged and stole it? Because, like, the only way America would have a bunch of treasure, being a new country, younger than Nintendo, would involve stealing that treasure in a bloody, horrifying, probably slavery-based massacre.
probably.
So it's like, when you go overseas to find treasure, it could have actually been hidden for millions of years. And you're like, if it belongs to a civilization that no longer exists, it feels less bad to dig it up from a temple. But like, for America to have a bunch of stolen treasure, that tracks. That's on brand. However, I did enjoy National Treasure. I want to be clear. Nick Cage is a thing, and I support it.
Well, I mean, the other advantage that Indiana Jones has over National Treasure is that National Treasure, at least, was set in present day.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the idea that these things have not been discovered, even with modern technology, becomes a little bit less believable, where all these things not being discovered with technology from the 40s and 50s is a little bit more believable that they just didn't actually have the technology to discover these things.
Well, it's kind of funny, like, to follow up on that, we have Tom Holland's Uncharted I saw relatively recently.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm professional treasure hunter Nathan Drake. Like, it's true, but if that took place in the 1980s, everything about it would feel less bad, and if it took place even earlier, like, the earlier you said it, the less bad it would feel.
Right.
Because Uncharted kind of suffers from, like, more gunfights, less puzzles, because they're like, hey, gunfights are easier to write than puzzles. I'm completely serious. Like, as a dungeon master, if we're doing, like, Tome of Horrors, Tome of Annihilation, which is literally, like, the Indiana Jones setting where you're on a jungle island looking for lost treasure, it is so much easier to throw a goblin fight at somebody than to actually come up with a clever puzzle.
Right.
So, like, for example, Tomb Raider. The more recent Tomb Raider movie I saw a while back, which was a decent movie. It's like, yeah, guns and explosions. I'm like, that's because you couldn't think of any more puzzles, could you? Puzzles are hard.
Well, so I will say, so the first three Indiana Jones movies, I haven't actually rewatched Crystal Skull. It is still directed by Steven Spielberg, so I assume some of these traits will carry over. But so firstly, I just want to say I really appreciate the like Steven Spielberg as a director. I watched a couple of videos about like what exactly it is a director does and how they frame a scene, you do the different cuts, how they direct the actors where they actually need to go in the scene to make it work. And I really think that they're very well made that way. The storytelling has really good pacing because there's a lot of action and fights and explosions and stuff. But then there also is a lot of really interesting like puzzles and traps and stuff. Uh, I don't think that they're particularly well written from a storytelling perspective because stuff just happens to Indiana Jones. He's very passive. The
He's a
story kind of
reverse.
happens around him.
He's a reverse John Wick. John Wick was the most active protagonist of all time. One thing happened to him, and then everything else was like an active choice.
It's true.
I mean, could
Digging
you
up his own
imagine
lost
though?
treasure from his basement.
Could you imagine watching an Indiana Jones movie starring John Wick where he just gun foos every Nazi he runs across?
Well, part of the reason I say that Indiana Jones is a sociopath is because of the iconic scene where he shoots a random Middle Eastern person dead. Uh, just like he just shoots them in the street. Like, but yeah, so ridiculous. I mean, they're very fun movies to watch. Don't get me wrong, I really do enjoy them, and they are really good examples of how a good director can elevate your storytelling through their visual cues and the framing of the scenes and blocking and whatnot. But he's such a sociopath.
Well, it's kind of interesting, like on this topic of movie. So I've actually seen every Tomb Raider movie, including when they rebooted it. And the difference between the Tomb Raider movies and Indiana Jones is I can tell you what happened in Indiana Jones. I can.
Okay.
Well, the Tomb Raider movies are like action, jungle, explore, earthquake, mechanisms, like, but they're almost like too much movie where it's all blend together. I'm like, there's definitely one where they're trying to get Pandora's box because they had a virus and they need to make the vaccine for the virus in Pandora's box. I think, and then the forest got filled with fog and there's explosions and then a giant spinning Beyblade thing. I'm like, I can't tell you what happened in that movie. It was a lot. And I think it's because they tried to shove an entire video game worth of set pieces into a movie. Where, like, Angels and Demons or The Da Vinci Code or National Treasure, it's kind of funny. It's like you want it to be clever, but followable.
Right.
And sometimes they forget to make it followable. Like, Atlantis the Lost Empire was extremely followable, for the record. Atlantis the Lost Empire was a fantastic animated Indiana Jones movie.
But yeah, I mean, I will say I did enjoy the Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny, and I haven't rewatched the Crystal Skull yet, which maybe I should. My boss, he watched the Dial of Destiny, and he said that it was worse than the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which, as previously mentioned,
that movie probably gets more hate than it deserves. I think it's one of those things where you couldn't possibly win.
Yeah, I would say so.
Like, no matter what you do, people are going to be like, that's dumb, and I hate it.
Well, and then, unfortunately, it's doomed to be a box office failure, not necessarily because it's a bad movie, but because nobody really wanted it.
And yeah, no one asked for it. And also, you had a movie with a jungle and didn't put The Rock in it in 2023? Are you crazy? Did you not read The Rock's contract? He goes in every jungle movie. Here's some Indiana Jones-esque movies starring The Rock that take place in jungle. We have Jungle Cruise. We have Rampage, I guess.
What? No, what?
I don't know. I was going somewhere with trying to list, like, times The Rock was in the jungle, but it turns out most of the times he's in the jungle aren't very Indiana Jones. He just likes to be in the jungle.
Jungle Cruise and Jumanji are kind of Indiana Jonesy. That's
Jumanji
for sure.
is such a weird one to give Indiana Jonesy because of the core gimmick behind it. I'm like, yeah, but like somehow I'm watching an Ikigai and I'm not sure how this happened to me.
And it's not even from Asia. It's like a North American idea.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny that cultural ideas came together in similar ways like that.
It was an Ikigai, and I'm sick of those. Where's the lie? There is none. I'm telling facts.
It is a fact.
I'm not about to go rewatch Romancing the Stone.
Romancing the Stone.
There are some old Indiana Jones style movies, but like I said, the new ones just kind of give up and be action movies.
Yeah, I would say that's mostly true about the new one too. I mean, again, like I say, it explores themes that are just not really on brand with Indiana Jones.
Yeah, what you want to do here's allow me to describe how you write an Indiana Jones movie. You go do 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 do, and have him adventuring through somewhere, solve a puzzle, shoot some Nazis, go home. And if you can manage to keep that up for 2 hours, you win.
Yeah, he does shoot some Nazis in the new movie.
Yeah, that's really the point. But then it's like, we're going to tell you stories. And I'm like, are you, though? Harrison Ford, you've taken all of the life out of him. He's done being alive. Like, he seems done with it.
Well, I mean, he is like 80 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I feel like, not to sound pessimistic or anything, but I feel like even if he wanted to do another Indiana Jones movie, the production time to make the movie, he would probably die before it was finished.
Yeah, or I mean, he did in fact find the crystal skull and it gave him immortality,
The crystal skull is also supposed to give you immortality?
I don't know. Sure.
Because that was just an alien skull for the Egyptians who built the pyramids, I'm pretty sure.
I'm sure, like, it could make you immortal. You don't know. Have you tried injecting it?
He did drink from the Holy Grail, and
He did! Doesn't that... No, that does the opposite of making you immortal.
Well, no, drinking from the right Holy Grail makes you immortal. Drinking
sure?
from the wrong one makes you age super fast and you die.
To say something extremely controversial on this podcast, Jesus is not famous for having lived through his adventure.
That is true.
So if the argument is the Holy Grail is God's cup and Jesus drank from it, the one thing it did not do was make him live forever on Earth.
Well, and then I do remember this about the Crystal Skull. I don't know if they just couldn't get Sean Connery again or what, but he died of old age off screen, and it's like, didn't he get healed by the Holy Grail? Like I thought both of them had immortality. I thought they were both just gonna live really long lives.
I mean, the real immortality is the fact that Tom Cruise is still doing stunts. Like, Mission Impossible is not an Indiana Jones movie. I need to be very clear. And a full episode at some point, I'm sure, is Mission Impossible style movies. And Tom Cruise is insane, but he's still doing the stunts, which is ridiculous. Because you know how much that person is insured for? Like, could you imagine someone tells you, oh, this person worth billions of dollars wants to stand on an aircraft and you can't say no?
So, just as a random aside, I don't know if this is his most impressive stunt. And we might have mentioned this. I might have mentioned this on the podcast once before. But Tom Cruise did what's called a halo jump, which is a high altitude, low open skydive. Where you have to be like 30,000 feet or higher, and you have to open your parachute 10,000 feet or lower. And I actually did this stunt, but I have even more respect for the random cameraman who, to get a shot of Tom Cruise's face as he jumps out of the airplane, this cameraman had to do the same jump, but backwards.
Yeah. Unsung heroes. I love that. Completely unrelated, shall we pivot to our random question of the day?
That sounds like a good unrelated pivot from an unrelated pivot.
And I like to say random question of the day to make them believe that between recordings we just call each other every day and ask a random question. It's great. So, This question is a good one. The zombie apocalypse is coming. Who are 3 people you want on your team?
Well, okay. Real people, fictional people. Is there any limitation here?
The question doesn't have limitation. So I'm going to say that let's go... Because we don't want to actually use names of people we know, because that seems like it would be like embarrassing for the people we don't pick. So let's go...
Well, no. I'm definitely... I don't think there's anybody in my life currently that I would actually want to help me in a zombie apocalypse. The first person that came to my mind is Tom Cruise, because he does his own stunts. He's
so the first person who came to my mind was Keanu Reeves.
another great actor who does his own stunts and probably actually would be genuinely helpful.
You know who I want though? I want Gordon Ramsay.
Gordon Ramsay. Why do you want Gordon Ramsay?
So first off, Gordon Ramsay looks like he can and would kill you. So first off, we have Gordon Ramsay, who looks like he could be good in a survival in a fight. But also, I'm in a zombie apocalypse scavenging for food, and I have bloody Gordon Ramsay as the cook on our squad? Like,
Okay, that's a good point. I mean, I was thinking of someone more actual like survivalist. I mean, Steve Irwin is unfortunately dead. Has been dead long enough that some of our podcast listeners might not even know who I'm talking about.
not true. First off, if you're listening to our podcast, go learn who Steve Irwin is, then come back. We don't need that kind of negativity. I'm willing to sacrifice a visitor if they haven't looked this up. Go look this up. Thanks. But yeah, so for people like actually useful, the problem is like when it's three people, you immediately think celebrities instead of like the actually most qualified. Like you're not just gonna go, oh, I want Michael Phelps because he can swim good. Like
the best waterbender.
because like there'd be Googling involved for me to actually look up the three most qualified. Like especially if time travel is saying like, can I grab Neil Armstrong in his prime who had to pass every test to be the first man in space? I'm sure he's in great shape, but please don't give me.
Oh, Bear Giles or Bear Grylls.
Bear Grylls is like a solid option.
He'd be pretty solid. He'd be better than Steve Irwin because he's not dead.
So, because I want to enjoy my zombie apocalypse, here's what I'm thinking. Here's my 3-man squad. First, I'm going to take Chef Gordon Ramsay. I stand by that.
Okay.
Second, I'm going to take Neil Armstrong in his prime. Because you had to literally be the top of every field to get that job. And then third, oh man, I gotta do it though. Bruce Lee in his prime.
I see. I was thinking. I definitely want a Bear Grylls or Giles. I should really look up how it's pronounced.
It's Grills. It's Grills.
It's Grills.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think I actually also want Henry Cavill.
I feel like he'd be pretty good. Like that feels like a weirdly good one.
So specifically, I watched a video about there's a scene in The Witcher, and I think it's like a 3-minute sequence of an unbroken, like a single continuous shot of him just going through and mowing down a whole bunch of baddies with swords as they're jumping out at him. And apparently, Henry Cavill is just like a beast in terms of physical fitness, and then B, like he actually did all those moves, and so he actually has some swordsmanship skills. So he would fill the same role as Bruce Lee, but probably slightly better because he's better with bladed weapons.
You know, if we're playing that game, if we're playing all right, let's just grab our team we would also summon for the Holy Grail War. Fine. I'm going to go with Chef Gordon Ramsay's, Simo Hayaya, and...
Simo Hayaya?
The White Death, the Finnish military sniper with the highest confirmed kill count in human history.
Okay, that guy is a badass.
Believed to have over 500 enemy soldiers during the Winter War. Like, if there's someone who can thrive into the woods, it's the Swedish sniper.
Okay, that's a good point. He might even be a better pick than Bear Grylls.
And Zhuge Liang.
Zhuge Liang?
Yeah.
Okay.
Romance of the Three Kingdoms, one of history's greatest tacticians. Because, you know, anyone who, actually was successful in the Middle Ages anywhere is probably going to do fine in the zombie apocalypse.
But, okay, so, yeah, I mean, I'm sticking with Tom Cruise, Henry Cavill, and Bear Grylls.
Like, if we're going with current people, like, that exist and not just necromancing people, I'm going to have to be like, all right, I'm going to go with Gordon Ramsay. I weirdly think that's, like, a surprisingly top-tier pick.
Yeah, I mean, he does have episodes where he actually, like, goes out and, like, finds food in the wilderness to, like, use as ingredients for his meals, I guess. Yeah.
And then, like, I honestly feel like I just need to Google a couple astronauts if I'm going with current living people, because I stand by the logic that if you're qualified to be an astronaut, you're a good pick.
Yeah, okay, but it depends on whether or not they've already been to space. Because if they've been to space, then their bone density is going to be much lower, and space is really bad for
I am
humans.
putting so
Like
much money on a
really
current
bad.
astronaut versus you surviving, even with reduced bone density.
Well, yeah, I am definitely the weakest link of my own team.
Tell you what, I'm just gonna grab you, Gordon Ramsay, and Keanu Reeves.
That way you just have to run faster than me?
Yeah, I just have to outsurvive Carl. I'm feeling great.
Well, I mean, okay, I do appreciate your astronaut theme for our Deep Space and Dragons themed podcast. So I guess I got to give you that one. The astronauts probably are a good pick.
Although I'm pretty sure Michael Phelps is still one of the most best shaped people ever. Not that like my solution is to grab Aquaman, but you know. But thank you everybody for tuning in, and I hope you start thinking of who you want to draft for your sports team for Zombie Apocalypse Wars or Water Gun Fights.
Zombie Apocalypse Wars.
Stay frosty out there. I don't know what I'm going to do for a sign off. You know what? I'm just going to click done with the episode. Carl, quick, say something witty. Bye.
Bye.